On March 6, 1981, inside a courtroom in Germany, a woman quietly reached into her purse, pulled out a pistol, and shot a man in the back 7 times. Not in an alley, not in secret, in front of judges, lawyers, police officers, journalists. And what happened next confused the entire country, because for a brief moment, people didn't see her as a murderer, they saw her as a mother. The strangest part wasn't the shooting itself, it was the silence before it. Witnesses said she looked calm, almost detached, as if she had already crossed some invisible line in her mind long before she entered that courtroom. And maybe she had. Because months earlier, her 7-year-old daughter had vanished into a nightmare that would leave Germany divided over one impossible question: how far can grief push a human being before society stops calling it revenge and starts calling it justice? The little girl's name was Anna. She had dark hair, a shy smile, and the kind of nervous energy adults usually describe as sensitive. People who knew her said she clung closely to her mother in public, often hiding behind her legs when strangers spoke to her. She wasn't loud. She wasn't rebellious. She was just a child trying to exist in a world that already felt unstable. And instability followed her family everywhere. Anna's mother, Marianne Bachmeier, had lived a difficult life long before the world learned her name. By the late 1970s, Marianne was a single mother in Lübeck, West Germany. She had survived abuse, unstable relationships, financial problems, and periods of emotional collapse that people around her rarely understood. Some described her as fiercely protective. Others called her volatile, but almost everyone agreed on one thing: Anna was the center of her life. The two lived modestly, sometimes barely getting by. But Marianne tried to build something that resembled normalcy. School in the mornings, meals together, small routines, tiny fragments of peace. Then one day, all of it disappeared. On May 5, 1980, Anna left home for school and never came back. At first, it didn't look like a nightmare. Missing children reports often begin with ordinary assumptions. Maybe she got lost. Maybe she went to a friend's house. Maybe there had been some misunderstanding. But hours passed, then more hours. And eventually, panic started crawling through the city. Police searched the area. Questions spread through neighborhoods. Witnesses were interviewed. But almost immediately, one detail began bothering investigators. A local man named Klaus Grabowski had reportedly been seen speaking to Anna before she vanished. Grabowski was already known to police, and people in town knew things about him too. He was 35 years old. Quiet, socially isolated, strange around children. Years earlier, he had been convicted of sexually abusing to young girls. He had even undergone chemical castration in prison in an attempt to suppress his urges. But eventually, he stopped the treatments, and somehow, he was free. That fact alone would later horrify the public. But at the time, nobody yet understood how catastrophic that decision would become. When investigators questioned Grabowski, he denied involvement, calmly, repeatedly, but something felt wrong. Witness statements began tightening around him like a noose. His explanations shifted, tiny inconsistencies appeared. The timeline didn't fully make sense. Then the pressure intensified, and eventually, he broke. Grabowski confessed that he had taken Anna to his apartment. What happened next was almost too brutal for the country to process. According to investigators, he attempted to sexually assault the little girl. At some point, Anna resisted. She screamed. Panic took over, and Grabowski strangled her. But even after death, the horror continued. To hide the crime, he placed Anna's body inside a cardboard box and left it near a canal. A box. That detail haunted people. Something about the image felt inhuman in a way that bypassed logic and went directly into the gut. A child reduced to evidence, hidden like trash. When police recovered her body, Germany erupted in outrage, and at the center of that rage was Marianne. People later tried to describe her emotional state during those months, but language always seemed insufficient. Some said she became hollow, others said she became obsessed. Friends noticed how her face changed, how she barely slept, how conversations drifted into silence. But beneath the grief was another emotion slowly mutating into something more dangerous: humiliation, because to Marianne, the system had failed long before Anna died. A convicted child predator had been allowed back into society. Warnings existed. Red flags existed. History existed. And still, her daughter ended up alone in his apartment. As the trial approached, media attention exploded. Newspapers published every detail they could find. Germany became emotionally divided. Some demanded the harshest punishment possible. Others worried the case was becoming emotionally uncontrollable. Meanwhile, Marianne attended court proceedings and listened to the man who murdered her daughter describe the final moments of Anna's life. Imagine that, sitting only feet away from the person responsible, hearing his voice, watching him breathe, watching him exist, day after day. And witnesses noticed things. Marianne rarely looked hysterical. That's what unsettled people. She often appeared eerily composed, focused, quiet, almost analytical. Like someone waiting for something. Then came March 6, 1981. The courtroom was crowded. Journalists filled seats early. People expected another routine day in a trial that had already emotionally exhausted the country. Nobody noticed anything unusual when Marianne entered. No panic, no screaming, no warning. Hidden inside her handbag was a .22 caliber Beretta pistol. Somehow, she brought it directly into the courtroom. To this day, that detail still shocks people. Security at the time was far looser than modern standards. But even then, the idea that a grieving mother could walk into an active murder trial armed with a loaded weapon felt surreal. Marianne sat quietly. Grabowski entered the courtroom escorted by officers. And then something happened that would freeze itself into German history forever. Marianne stood up, aimed the pistol at Grabowski's back, and fired. Once, twice, again. 7 shots in total. Chaos exploded instantly. Screaming echoed through the room. People ducked beneath tables. Journalists scattered. Officers rushed toward her. Grabowski collapsed to the floor, dead, but the most disturbing detail came afterward. Witnesses said Marianne didn't look panicked. She reportedly said, "I wanted to kill him." Simple, direct, almost emotionless. No dramatic speech, no breakdown, no attempt to flee. As police restrained her, Germany split apart almost overnight. Because now the country faced a terrifying moral contradiction. A woman had committed murder inside a courtroom. And millions of people sympathized with her, some even celebrated her. Flowers arrived at the prison where she was held, letters poured in supporting her actions. Many citizens believed she had done what the justice system failed to do. Others believed society was dangerously romanticizing vengeance. And beneath all the public debates sat an uncomfortable truth nobody could ignore. If Anna had never crossed paths with Klaus Grabowski, none of this would have happened. But another question lingered in the background. Had Marianne planned the shooting from the beginning? Investigators believed she had. The pistol wasn't impulsive. She had acquired it beforehand. She had concealed it carefully. She waited for the exact moment Grabowski entered the room. Everything suggested preparation. And yet psychologically, the situation was more complicated than simple revenge. Experts studying the case later described Marianne as emotionally fragmented by grief and trauma. Not detached from reality exactly, but consumed by a singular fixation. Some psychologists compared her mental state to dissociation, functioning externally while internally collapsing. Others disagreed completely. They believed Marianne knew precisely what she was doing. And maybe that's what makes the case so disturbing decades later. Not insanity, not loss of control, but clarity. The possibility that a grieving human being can arrive at violence through logic rather than impulse. During her own trial, Marianne became the object of public fascination. Cameras followed her everywhere. Interviews aired constantly. People debated her morality at dinner tables, in newspapers, on television. Was she a vigilante, a victim, a murderer, a mother? Even the courtroom atmosphere felt strange. Observers noticed how differently people reacted to Marianne compared to ordinary defendants. There was tension, yes, but also sympathy. Some legal officials appeared uncomfortable with how emotionally invested the public had become. And Marianne herself remained difficult to read. Sometimes cold, sometimes exhausted, sometimes eerily calm. At one point, she admitted openly that she intended to kill Grabowski. There was no elaborate defense strategy pretending otherwise. The facts were obvious, but emotionally, nothing about the case felt simple. Because every detail dragged people back to Anna, back to the apartment, back to the cardboard box, back to the failures that allowed a convicted predator near children again. Eventually, Marianne Bachmeier was convicted of manslaughter rather than murder. The court recognized diminished responsibility tied to psychological distress and trauma. Her sentence shocked many people for being relatively light. She served only a few years. And when she was released, the fascination never truly disappeared. For decades, documentaries, articles, and debates continued revisiting the case because it touched something deeper than crime itself. It forced society to stare directly into the uncomfortable space between justice and revenge. Most people claim they oppose vigilantism until they encounter a story that emotionally tempts them otherwise. That's the dangerous part. Cases like Marianne Bachmeier's expose how fragile moral certainty can become when grief enters the equation. The legal system depends on emotional restraint, procedure, distance, rules, but grief destroys distance, especially parental grief. And the more people learned about Anna's murder, the harder it became for many to condemn Marianne without hesitation. Even today, reactions remain divided. Some see her as a mother abandoned by the system. Others see her as proof that personal vengeance can never become justice without dragging society into chaos. Because once emotion becomes permission for killing, where does it stop? That question still lingers decades later. But there's another layer to the story people rarely discuss. After the shooting, Marianne didn't become triumphant. There was no victory, no closure. No emotional release powerful enough to resurrect Anna or erase what happened. In interviews years later, Marianne often appeared tired more than angry. As if revenge had not healed her pain, only transformed it into something quieter and permanent. And maybe that's the final tragedy hidden beneath the headlines. People imagine revenge as an ending, but for many who pursue it, revenge changes nothing except the shape of suffering. Anna remained dead, Grabowski remained dead, and Marianne carried both deaths for the rest of her life. In 1996, Marianne Bachmeier died from pancreatic cancer at age 46. Some newspapers still called her the revenge mother. Even in death, the label followed her, not simply because she killed a man in a courtroom, but because her story forced millions of people to confront emotions they preferred to believe they were above. Hatred, retribution, the fantasy of personal justice. And perhaps the most unsettling part of all is this: if you had been sitting in that courtroom, hearing every detail of what happened to Anna, watching the man responsible walk in alive, would you truly know what you would have done? Or do we only discover that answer when grief finally breaks something inside us?
If you enjoy dark true crime stories, disturbing mysteries, and psychological investigations, make sure to subscribe to Psychoi777. New videos are uploaded every day. Don't forget to like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new case.